right, everyone, I'm going to get a drink of water and we will get started. So we're continuing on today with Dr. Bale's work, his classic work on healing. Your mind can heal you. And we're up to the part about how to develop strong faith. But just to back up for a minute on how we got there and why it is so important. We live in a universe that responds to us according to our belief. This is the basic premise. In the New Testament, Jesus says it is done unto you according to your belief. In the Old Testament, in Proverbs, we're told, as you think and believe in your heart, so are you. In Buddhism, there's a saying, everything you experience is a result of what you have thought. And the Stoic philosophers, the self-help, psychology, motivational gurus would tell us that what the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. If you go back and look through the different self-help programs, if you look through the thread of religions, you find this theme running. Ralph Waldo Trine says there's a silver thread. And if we follow that thread, we find sameness. The intellect looks for differences, usually. The heart looks for sameness. How are we alike, not how are we different? And one of these ideas that occurs in different organized ways of thinking, philosophies and religions, is that if you change your thinking, you change your life. Over and over again, you find this theme arising. Whatever you can do or dream or dare, begin at once, and unseen forces will come to your side. Things like this occur through the ages, and we have to wonder, well, why? Why is that so? And how is that so? So we take the basic operating premise, the place to start. You got to start from somewhere. I think in our society the problem is we always want to start from somewhere else. We're not there yet, but that's where we want to start. It's like trying to lose 20 pounds before I go on a diet, because I don't want to get on the scale just yet. The place we start our inquiry, our exploration of this thing called mind, of these things called thought, of this idea of what is knowing, is we start with this idea that it is done unto us according to our belief. And then the question is, well, how would we know that that's true? What is belief? Is belief something we're born with? Is belief something that we can develop? And what is faith? Is faith just a stronger version of belief? And all of these questions that we explore. So it's good to explore these questions. Right? We as human beings have been given the ability to not only be aware of thought and the activity of thought and the reaction to thought in our life, but we can also change thought. We can think about what we're thinking about. And as far as we know, other species don't do that. But we can think about what we're thinking about. We may be self-aware. But we may not. We have to make that choice. You and I have to make that choice. Nothing can make that choice for us. We have to make that choice to think about what we are thinking about. And I often ask myself the question and ask others the question, well, how much time do we actually spend thinking about what we're thinking about? And the answer is very little, very little. Now, as life evolved, as our species kind of moved from being hunter-gatherers, from living in the caves, from dealing with the elements and the nature and wild animals and all those things, it was probably good to be able to file things away and then work on them, sort of remotely, I guess is the best way to put it. We experience something one time, we know how it works, we file it away, and then our brain kind of uses that preconceived notion that we have from then on. And that frees up the senses, and it frees up the mind to be alert and aware of new things, of new dangers, of what's going on in the environment. But what happens to us is we do that, and we're sort of living our lives below a level of conscious awareness. In other words, how do we form our beliefs? How do we form our faith, if you want to think of it? And remember, I said that faith is a knowing so certainly that an opposite idea cannot enter the mind. This is Ernest Holmes' definition of faith. A knowing so certainly that an opposite idea can't enter the mind. And the example I used was gravity. We have absolute faith in gravity. Not one of us got up this morning and wondered whether gravity was going to be working today. We didn't wonder if when we stepped out of bed we would float up to the ceiling. We didn't even think about gravity. That's how certain we are that it works. We don't even think about it. It just works. And how did we develop that certainty? How did we develop that? We developed it through experience. We have never had an experience of weightlessness, unless we paid, to go on one of the airplanes that goes into a big dive and lets you free fall. We have never had that experience. We might experience something like that when we go into a swimming pool with the buoyancy in the water, but we have never really had to worry about getting out of bed in the morning and gravity was not working. The important thing there is that we have experiences all the time. We have experiences, and part of our consciousness is interpreting those, is assigning meaning to those, and then filing those away, and then in the future, if it's faced with the same event again, it draws from that memory and says, I recognize that. This is this, you see. This is how this works. Now, a lot of what the opinions that we form when something happens and we kind of observe it and we form an opinion about it, they're not necessarily true. They could very well be wrong. And it doesn't matter. Excuse me. It doesn't matter to the part of us that's filing it away, whether it's true or not. That's its opinion, and it believes that it is true. But what happens is it controls our behavior from that point on. We act the rest of our lives as if that is true. And the example that I've given many times on that was from W. Clement Stone, who said that he traveled a lot for business. And he was in a restaurant one time and they had frog's legs on the menu. And all his friends had told him that frog's legs were delicious, but he had never tried them. So he ordered them and they were terrible. They were absolutely terrible. He couldn't understand how his friends could like frog's legs. They were just so bitter, so sour. So for the next 20 years he never ate another frog's leg. And one night he was out to dinner and all of his friends were there with him. And the restaurant that they were eating at had frog's legs, and his friends said, "Oh, this is the best place in the state to get frog's legs. You need to try these." He said, "Yeah, I don't like frog's legs." And they said, "Oh, these are the best. You got to have these." And he said, "Well, maybe if they're not the jumbo kind, because the last time I had jumbo kind and they weren't good." And the waiter assured him, "No, these are just regular frog's legs. These aren't the jumbo frog's legs." Well, the platter came out and they were jumbo. And all his friends were eating them, and all his friends were talking about how delicious they were. So he decided, well, they're here, I might as well try them. And he bit into one, and it was delicious. It was delicious. And he realized that the first batch of frog legs that he had 20 years prior, there was something wrong with them. They were bad, or they weren't cooked right. There was something wrong with them. And he allowed that experience to shape his decision making for the next 20 years. Because part of him believed something that wasn't true. All frogs' legs are bad. That wasn't true. My point for us today is that much of what we have come to believe over the years, that we have been taught by parents, by teachers, that we've picked up through pop culture, from our friends, from watching TV and all these things, they're not necessarily true. Not necessarily true. But if we believe that they're true, just even at a psychological level, if we believe that they're true, they guide our behavior. They shape our behavior. And then if we take it the next step to the spiritual level, it's done unto us according to belief, our belief. It starts to appear as if it's true in our lives. As far as experience is concerned, we get to have that experience. When it comes to things like health, for example, some people believe that if they get caught in the rain, they're going to catch a cold. And they do. And other people don't believe that. And they don't. Some people believe that they get sick every year in the winter. And they do. And other people don't believe that. And they don't. And you might say, well, yeah, but maybe those people are sickly and they get sick. So this is what Bales gave us the example of the man who was suffering from the arthritis, and he couldn't walk, and it developed over a period of years, and he couldn't walk. And it turns out that that his body had developed this arthritis over years of resentment. The man didn't like walking to his sister-in-law's house on Sunday. And once Bales helped him to understand that and helped him to find a different way to deal with that, within 2 months the arthritis went away. And this was after he had been to all different doctors, and he had his tonsils removed, and he had the fillings removed from his teeth, and all these different things that he was trying to do to deal with it in the physical world. But the problem wasn't in the physical world. The cause of the problem wasn't in the physical world. The effects of the problem were in the physical world, but the cause was in the mental, spiritual world. So this is why he says that a disease is the physical manifestation of a distorted thought. Now we talked a couple months ago, we looked at Ralph Waldo Trine, and he gave us the example of the water flowing from the aqueduct and going into the lily pond and creating this beautiful oasis. And if you didn't hear that talk, go back on YouTube and find it and listen to it. A beautiful image that he gave us. All that needed to be done for that life in that pond to flourish was that the connection to the water flowing in the aqueduct had to be made. It just had to be made. You had to turn the valve and open the water gate and let more water down into the pond. As long as the fresh water was flowing into the pond, life was flourishing there. But once that valve was closed, the life that was there began to stagnate and die. So upon what did the life in and around that lily pond depend? It depended upon its connection to the source. Depended upon its connection to the fresh mountain water flowing through the aqueduct. When the connection was closed, it appeared that the pond was sick and was dying, and it was. But there was nothing wrong with the pond. What was wrong was the connection to the source. Once that connection was reestablished, the intelligence that runs the universe, that knows what to do, reestablished, demonstrated its presence, if you want to call it that, by restoring the beauty and the harmony to the pond. And he gave us that example. So this is what Ralph Waldo Trine, he gave us that example saying really what we are trying to do is make sure that we have a solid connection to the source. And the way that we do that, and the only place that we can do that, is in our thoughts. And I would take it one step further. So Dr. Bales would tell us that our faith, that what we have faith in, that what we believe so strongly that the opposite could not enter our mind, that is our connection. That is our connection. Now, if I were working on a project, if I was going to build, for example, let's say I'm building a picnic table for my yard, and I go to the store and I buy my lumber and I lay the lumber out and I get my ruler and my pencil and my square and I start marking off where I'm going to make my cuts so that I can assemble this picnic table. Then I go into my workshop and I get my circular saw out and I take my circular saw out, and I pull the guard back so that the blade is just touching the wood right on the mark where I want to cut it, and I squeeze the trigger to start the saw, to cut the wood, and nothing happens. Now I might look at that and say there's something wrong. The saw is broken. You see, something is wrong with the saw. I could take the saw all apart. I could put the saw all back together. I would never find what was wrong with it because I forgot to plug it in. The saw is fine. It is the connection to the electrical grid, to the source, that was the problem. So what we are trying to do, or just what I'm trying to get to, what Trine was telling us, what Bales is telling us, is perfection exists. The perfect health exists. The divine mind is perfect. There is never too much of anything within the divine. There's never too little of anything in the divine. There are no false growths within the divine. See? The divine is perfect, whole, and complete. And that is the truth of our spiritual nature. We are spiritual beings expressing through our physical bodies, or human bodies. The truth of our physical nature is perfection at the spiritual level. The truth of our spiritual nature is perfection. And how that perfection appears, how it manifests itself in the physical world is filtered through our beliefs. It is filtered through our beliefs. So the sun is shining brightly, pretend, because we're all getting rain today, but the sun is shining brightly and it's coming down through the window and it's streaming through the window onto the floor of my sunroom. But the window is all marked up. The children were over and they got their little watercolor pens out and they were drawing on the window. And now what we have is, instead of beautiful sunlight, perfect sunlight shining on the floor, we have abstract patterns of colors where the little ones were kind of drawing on the window, you see. Now I could look at the abstract images on the floor and I could say, perfection doesn't exist. There is no perfection. Look at this. This is a mess. This is scribble. This is not sunlight. What is going on here? And I'd say, but on the other side of the glass, the sun is shining brightly, the sun is perfect, the sun is whole, the sun is complete. But it is filtered through the marks that the children left on the window. These are our beliefs. These are the filters of consciousness that we have through our beliefs that determine how that perfection outpictures in our life. We go back to electricity. There's a stove in my kitchen. I can turn the burner on. I can put a pan on there. I can put some soup in there. In a little while, I'll have a beautiful hot meal. The electricity doesn't know that it's cooking my soup. The electricity doesn't care that it's cooking my soup. All the electricity knows is that I complied with the laws of electricity. I complied with the way electricity works by turning that knob. Now, I could turn that knob, and I could turn it up too high, and I could walk away from the stove and go do something else, and I could come back in an hour, and instead of a delicious hot bowl of soup, I would have a burnt, sticky mess, and perhaps I would have a damaged pan. Electricity didn't know that it was burning my soup. The electricity didn't know that it was destroying my pan. The electricity only knew, if it knows anything, the electricity only knew that I complied with the way that electricity works by turning the knob. What all of this is about, what Bales is telling us, what Trine is telling us, what Holmes has been telling us, what all of the teachers are telling us, is that our connection to the source depends upon the quality of our thinking, the quality of our faith. And think of it as operating as a law, in that if we give it an image, a mental image, a filter, like the crayons on the window, if we give it an image to shine through of perfect health, it shines through as perfect health. If we give it a distorted image, it manifests in our life as less than perfection. Think of disease, this is from Bales, think of disease as being the outpicturing of a distorted thought. I was thinking of this morning, in that Bales gives us steps to go through in order to help develop this strong faith. These are the steps that we recognize as the steps of a process we call spiritual mind treatment, which is for the purpose of treating our consciousness to the truth. It is for clearing up the crayon marks that are on the window of our consciousness. It is for creating a clearer connection in our thought with the source that is perfect. It is opening that water gate a little bit more to allow the influx of the divine, the inflow of the divine. Now you remember I said a couple of weeks ago, we don't have to know, if we have an erroneous belief, we don't have to know where we got it. We don't have to go back as we might in some type of treatment, psychology, psychiatry, those kind of things. We don't have to go back and find the origin of that false belief. All we have to know is that if we are experiencing less than the perfect health and the perfect perfection that we wish, there must be a false belief in there somewhere, because perfection is shining through the distortion of our thoughts, and it is outpicturing as less than perfection. So rather than try to figure out how those marks got on the window, all we have to do is clean the window. And the way we do that is by constantly opening that floodgate a little bit more and allowing the truth to flow through us, allowing ourselves by deliberately taking control of what we are thinking, deliberately turning our thought towards the goodness and the perfection of God. As our consciousness dwells more on the goodness and the perfection of God, more of that flow comes into our life, and as it comes into our life, it purges and purifies and removes the negative thoughts that are in there. Right? This is important. Dr. Holmes says a positive thought has the power to dissolve a negative thought. So you say, well, I've got all these negative thoughts. I picked these up. They're part of life. I'm part of race consciousness. I've got all this going on. How do I get rid of it? A positive thought dissolves a negative thought. You deliberately fill your consciousness with positive thoughts, and the negative thoughts disappear. But how much time do we spend paying attention to what we're paying attention to and deliberately focusing on positive? And I would say not much, because we're very busy and we go through our lives and we go through our workday doing things that we learned to do years ago. When you learn how to drive your car, you were paying a lot of attention. Now you drive your car, you pay no attention at all. You turn the key, it starts, you go to work. You know, I ask you, how many times did you put your foot on the gas? How many times did you put your foot on the brake? Did you put your blinker on before you looked over your shoulder or after? Did you put your blinker on after you looked in the mirror or before? All these different things. You say, I don't know. I just changed this. I don't know. We did it automatically. To exercise our ability to be conscious spiritual beings, conscious of what we are putting in or allowing to be put into, or what we are agreeing with that is going into our consciousness. This is the key to life, right? So Don Miguel Ruiz in the Four Agreements, he says, that which you don't reject, you have accepted. So you're watching TV and they come on and they say something extremely negative. What you have to do is say to yourself, that's not true for me. I don't accept that. And you don't have to say it out loud. If you're in a meeting somewhere and somebody says something you disagree with, you don't have to say anything out loud. But you need to say it to yourself. That's not my truth. I don't agree with that. That may be their truth, but that's not my truth. So my point is that perfection exists, but we have to become very deliberate in our working with our consciousness in developing a strong faith. Now you can look at this at the physical level as well. You know, if for example we wanted to be stronger, let's say we wanted to be able to lift a heavy weight. So well, you can do that, but the way you got to do that is you have to lift little weights frequently, and you have to build your muscles up. Whether you go to the gym, or whether you buy a barbell set at home, or whether you pick up a couple of gallons of milk and just lift them up every day, but you have to do that. You have to exercise. You have to deliberately do that. You can't just go out one day and pick up 150 pounds something that you wanted to pick up. You may have to work your way up to it so you don't hurt yourself. You have to build your spiritual muscle as well. You have to build your spiritual faith as well. So the possibility is there, the capability is there, the perfection is there, but we have to make our connection with it. So we spent a couple of weeks talking about how do we know the perfection is there, and we said, look, just look. Look at the universe. Look at the miracle of the human body. Think of how a baby's body is born. Look. And then we must train ourselves to be aware. Right? Train ourselves to be aware. And what I realized this morning is we have many, many, many different words for our aches, for our pains, for our ailments, for diseases, for all these things. But we have very, very few words for health. It's just kind of generic. It's just health. Now, disease is the lack of ease, is the lack of health. So, excuse me, the reason this is important is before you go into a process of building your faith, before you go into a process of spiritual mind treatment, you have to know what you're treating for. What is your intention? What do you want to have happen here today? And most people cannot state what they want without stating it in terms of what they don't want. What do you want today? Well, I want to be free of pain. Okay, but now we're still talking about pain, see? And pain is a condition. Pain is a condition that has resulted from a distorted thought. We want to talk about what we do want, not what we don't want. What is it like when there's no pain? Well, there's no pain. I heard that. I heard you say that. Speak to me in positive terms, because the universal mind, the subconscious mind, the law of mind, whatever you want to call it, does not understand the word not. When you say, I want there to be no pain, you're talking about pain. So we have to find a word that is the opposite of. And we don't really know how to do that. That's my experience. Well, what is it like when there's no pain? So now we have to start getting into comfort and ease and flexibility and movement and all of these words that we never think about when we have them. We just don't think about that. How many times you get up out of your chair and you walk down the hall and you say, oh my goodness, isn't it a miracle how my ankles are moving, how my knees are moving, how my hips are moving. My lungs are taking in air, my heart is pumping, I have wonderful energy. We don't think of those things. But if I got to walk down the hall and turn your knee and you think, oh, my knee, it's aching, it's twisted, we dwell on what we don't want. So what we have to do is we have to train ourselves to have a new vocabulary. We have to train ourselves to be thinking about the goodness, the perfection. And all the years that your body worked just fine, all the years that it did everything it needed to do without our interference. But now what we want to do is we want to celebrate that. We want to give thanks for that. So gratitude is one of the easiest ways to become aware, to be grateful for all these things, to celebrate all these things, to be happy for all these things. Just as in physical exercise, we need to be deliberate about training ourselves, our spiritual practice needs to be disciplined. We need to make sure that we do it on a regular basis. We need to bring ourselves to the point of being able to do it all day long. To be in the moment, to be aware, to be conscious, to be choosing what we are allowing to go into our minds, what we are allowing to go into our belief systems. So in the past, something happened and we observed it and we believed it and it didn't matter. Now it matters. Now it matters. Excuse me again. So Bale said if we find ourselves in a foreign land, we may not have faith that we can eat the red berries because when we were kids growing up, Mom told us not to eat the red berries. But if we saw some people who lived in this strange land come along and pick the berries and eat them, now we would have faith that we could do that, right? We have the experience, we've had the experience of seeing someone eat those berries and they were okay. He also gives us an example of once he went out and drove his car on the ice in Lake Michigan. He said, but he had faith that the ice was thick enough because he saw other cars out there driving. He saw icemen who were sawing big chunks of ice out of the lake to take back to their ice houses, and he could see how thick the ice was. And he had faith that he could do it, so he did it. There was no superstition, there was no lighting of candles, there was no burning of incense, there was no chanting, there was none of those things that we typically think of when it comes to a religious practice. He knew, and he knew that he knew. So what we were talking about then is we want to bring ourselves to a knowing so certainly that the possibility to the opposite cannot enter our mind. And then we get into this idea of, well, what can be cured and what can't be cured? Are there some diseases that are so tough that this doesn't work? And we want to connect, we want to go back to, well, what do you think is too tough for God? What do you think is too powerful that the omnipotence of the universe cannot deal with it? See? So when we are thinking from our limited human perspective, we think of things as being hard and struggle and tough and all of those things. And what we want to do is go back again and connect to that spiritual side. We want to bring our thoughts to that spiritual side. And we want to start from that place. So this is what he's talking about, and he gives us a 7-step process. Now, normally I treat, excuse me again, normally I teach a 5-step process, but there is a 7-step process. And I tend to joke that in Texas there's probably a 2-step process, but some people don't get that. So if you didn't get that, just think about that for a while. And let me see if I can find the chapter that I'm looking for here. How to Build a Strong Faith. This is chapter 4 in his book, Your Mind Can Heal You. Okay. No, I'm sorry, it's chapter 5. Chapter 5. Here we go. So these are his 7 steps, and he called them the 7 R's. Now I gave you an 8th. I said you have to start with intention. What is it you want to have happen here today? If you don't know what you want to have happen here today, don't waste your time with the other 7 steps. Right? You have to know what you want to have happen. It has to be in positive terms, not in terms of what you don't want, but it has to be in positive terms what you do want, and it has to be in the present tense now. And I don't want it tomorrow, I want it now. Because if we put our intentions in the future, they will always be coming to us. The divine only lives in the moment. We have to be in the moment. So step number 1, he says, is relax. Right? You have to get yourself prepared. If you're busy, if you're doing other things, if you're driving a car, if you're working in the yard, now you can certainly do a treatment at any time. Don't get me wrong. But he's giving us a formula or a recipe to enhance our success. He says, relax. If your mind is scattered, find a way to center it. Bring yourself to a book, a tape. Try the 23rd Psalm, try the 91st Psalm in the Bible. Listen to relaxing music if you have relaxing music, and that helps. But find your way of breaking the pattern of your mind being everywhere. Right? And this is why meditation is an important spiritual practice. It teaches us how to get the monkey mind under control. But he says the first thing we want to do is relax. He says relax physically, because that's going to aid you in relaxing mentally. And then relax mentally by clearing the mind of all possibility of discordant thoughts. We start to remind ourselves that God is perfect. God is whole. God is complete. Whatever our word for God is, whatever our term for God is. The universe is okay. The universe has been around for billions of years. And when this universe is gone, there'll be another universe around for billions of years. Life is okay. There's a beautiful cycle of life, right? And this is why he said, think about a child's body developing in the womb. Think about the miracle of how a forest grows from an acorn. Think about how wonderful it is that the trees give us their breath and we give them ours. Deliberately bring your thought to something that starts to help you to know, right? To realize, to feel that there is perfection in the universe. I may not be experiencing the fullness of that perfection right now, but perfection exists. We have to bring ourselves to understanding that. So he says, once we bring ourselves there, then we recognize that the omnipotence, all of the power of the universe, and the omniscience, all of the knowledge of the universe, is omnipresence. It is all the presence of the universe. So again, I say, put this problem that we're working towards, put this idea of what we want to have happen now, and think about it from the divine point of view. So we say, today, now, I experience perfect ease, perfect comfort, perfect peace, perfect flexibility, whatever it is that we want right now. And then we think, well, you know, the divine already is all those things. What does the divine have to be worried about? What does it have to be stressed about? It does whatever it wants. It is perfectly free. It moves in any direction it wants. It is perfectly flexible. It is perfectly at ease. So we're starting now to recognize that this intention that we have already exists. It already exists. The divine already is perfect. The divine already is whole. The divine already is complete. Now, at this point, we might start to think, well, that's good. Okay, so the divine is perfect, whole, and complete out there somewhere. But then we have to understand the next R, our relationship, right? So he started with relax, recognize what God is, and then our relationship with God. But this perfection has created me out of itself, as its expression of life, as its expression of love. And it can only wish for me what it would wish for itself. It could never wish itself any harm or sin or sickness or disease, restrictions, lack, limitation, any of those things. It wishes for itself joy. It wishes for itself freedom. It wishes for itself expression. And it can only wish the same for me. See? So now we dwell on our relationship with the divine. Now each of these steps can take a minute, can take an hour, can take a week, can take more. But we stay with each one until we go as far as we possibly can at the moment. Is there any way right here and right now that I can think about anything else or do anything else that is going to make me realize more of God's perfection? No, I got it. See, right now, the divine is perfect, the divine is whole, the divine is complete. I feel that. I understand that. I have that. Now we move on to our relationship. See? Now, once we understand that the divine is already perfect and that the divine has created us out of that perfection and wishes for us only the goodness and the perfection, sometimes what happens then is this little doubt comes up for us, you see. Now this is a step sometimes called denial and affirmation, reaffirmation. But basically what happens is we say, God is good, God is great, God is perfect, God is whole, God is complete. And I'm going through that quickly just for example. And we say, and that includes me. And then there's this little voice in the back of our head that says, ooh, wait a minute. How does that include you? You've got a bum knee, you've got a bad back, you got a headache, you got this, you got that. See? And that's when he says right there we have to stop and we have to reason. We have to reason the doubts away. We say, well, that may be an experience I'm having now, but that is not the truth of my being. That is not a permanent experience. It does not always have to be. Right? And we know from watching, perhaps from a personal experience, we know from watching videos that at times people simply through controlling their thought, controlling their minds, for example, through hypnosis, their physical body no longer, they are no longer aware of pain in their physical body. Just through the power of mind, the pain is no longer an experience. See? Now we may be having difficulty doing it. It's really tough if you have pain to sit there and say, I know I'm experiencing pain, but this pain does not have the power to sustain itself. It is a temporary condition that is passing. It is a temporary condition that has passed. I have let it go. So we have to keep reasoning. If the doubt comes up, he says, reason it away. Reason it away. Why is this a lie pretending to be the truth? Reason it away. So once we're kind of in this state where, okay, the divine is perfect, whole, and complete. I am one with that wholeness and that perfection. The truth of my being right here and right now is that perfection is right here and right now. Now we recognize that. I'm sorry, we realize that. That's his next step, realization. So I realize that because the divine is perfect, the divine is all presence, I am part of that presence, then the truth of my being must be that perfection, that perfect health, that perfect ease, that perfect freedom of movement, the perfect stamina, the vitality, the energy, however we want to state it, but we have to state it in positive terms and not in, I'm no longer tired. I'm no longer tired becomes I experience the fullness of the energy of God's life. Okay? So we realize that. We say this can be no other way. So it's like when we were kids and we were learning logic, you know, and it said if A equals B and B equals C, then A must equal C. Right? If the divine is perfect and it has created me out of that perfection, then that perfection must be right here, right now. A equals B, B equals C, A equals C. We have to bring ourselves to that realization. Then what he tells us is we have to release it. So we realize that there's a power in the universe that responds to us according to our belief, but now we have to let it go. We have to let it go from our thoughts, from our minds, from our trying to make it happen. We have to just say, okay, so I've brought myself to this belief. Through this process, I've brought myself to a greater degree of belief, and I have set into motion the power that responds to me according to my belief. I believe that that power is right now increasing my belief. I believe that that power right now is doing whatever needs to be done for the full and complete demonstration of my intention. That's why I say you have to start with your intention. But we have to let it go. If we feel the need to give it a little push, we haven't let it go. If we feel the need to kind of help it along, we haven't let it go. We have to let it go. Remember I gave you the example of rolling a snowball down the hill. Once you get it started, gravity takes over. If you want to run alongside it and give it a little push every once in a while, you haven't let it go. You haven't let it go. What this means is you're trying to do it through your level of understanding. You're not creating an opening for a greater opportunity, for a greater way for it to happen. Excuse me, you're trying to make it happen the way you want to make it happen. So we release it, we let it go. And he gives us the last R, is rejoice. Rejoice. Celebrate it. It's done. It's an already accomplished fact in the mind of God. Apologize again. It's an already accomplished fact in the mind of God. It is done. I celebrate it. All right, I'm going to give you his 7 R's one more time. Now he does tell us that each of us must find our own way, and this is why, I say we typically teach 5 steps. He's got 7 steps here. It doesn't matter. You have to find what works for you. You have to be willing to try. You have to experiment. Turn your mind to God and keep it there. Don't let it go. Emmett Fox says, turn away from the problem. Turn to God. They're all saying the same thing. Number 1, relax. Number 2, recognize what God is. Number 3, your relationship with God. Number 4, reason away any doubts that might occur. Number 5, realize that the thing that you are declaring already is. You already have it. It is right now manifesting and expressing through your life. Number 6, release. And number 7, rejoice. All right? So this is just one process. There are other teachers, there are other processes. As I say, Dr. Holmes uses 5 steps. Dr. Bales uses 7 steps. There's really only one step, which is if you know what God is, then everything else must fall into place. So I invite you to practice. So how do you know anything? How do you know anything? And the answer to that is usually through your experience. So you can read about it, you can see other people driving on the ice, you can see other people using this process and changing their lives. That's a good place to start. But you must use it yourself. Just like going to the gym, you have to go pick up those weights if you're going to get stronger. You have to build your spiritual muscle. Pick an area of your life that you want to change, you want to see a change. Think about these steps that I gave you today. Think about what we've been talking about for the last couple months. Pay attention to what you're paying attention to. Learn how to observe your thoughts. Learn how to observe the emotions that are arising within your psyche. Learn how to do the one thing that you can do that no other species can, which is to be self-aware. Learn to take dominion of your thoughts. And by changing your thinking, you'll change your life. And so it is.